Vivienne Zeller didn't mean to destroy the entire display, but when her oversized tote bag caught the corner of the book tower, it collapsed like a doomed game of literary Jenga. "Seriously?" she whispered, staring in horror as hardcover biographies, romance novels, and an unfortunate cookbook scattered across the polished wood floor of the downtown Seattle bookstore. She dropped to her knees, cheeks burning. "I swear I'm not a menace," she muttered, trying to stack them back as fast as she could. "I believe you," a deep, amused voice said above her. She looked up and froze. The man crouching beside her was tall, clean-shaven, with dark hair swept carelessly off his forehead, and sharp blue eyes that somehow looked like they'd seen too much and still weren't done. He was wearing a black wool coat over a gray sweater that looked like it cost more than her rent. His watch looked expensive. Actually, everything about him looked expensive. "Here." He handed her a copy of Hemingway's A Movable Feast. "You've got a whole avalanche going here." "Oh God, I'm so sorry," she said, grabbing it. "I was just reaching for a book I couldn't afford and well, gravity had other plans," he smiled. "Bookstore accidents happens to the best of us." Vivienne tried to focus on the books, not on his face or his voice. "Thanks for helping. Most people would have just stepped over me." "Then most people are idiots," she laughed before she could stop herself. "You work nearby?" he asked casually as he picked up a copy of The Great Gatsby and set it on the shelf. "Kind of. I work at the coffee shop across the street." "Part-time," she added quickly, "and I'm in grad school, trying to be a writer." He nodded as if that made perfect sense. "So you're here to be inspired." "I was really just here to smell the books and cry over the prices," he chuckled. "Fair enough." Then, without warning, he stood and extended his hand. "I'm Sterling Jensen." She hesitated, then took it. "Warm, steady, Vivienne Zeller." "Nice to meet you, Vivienne Zeller." He said her full name like it was something interesting, something worth remembering. They finished restacking the last of the books. She forced herself to step back. "Thanks again. I've got to get back to my shift before my manager thinks I've fled the country." "Wait," he said, reaching into his coat pocket. "You dropped this." She turned and he held out a worn notebook. Her notebook? The one she carried everywhere with half-finished stories, fragments of poems, and lists of books she wanted to buy when her bank account wasn't in the single digits. "Oh," she breathed, taking it from his hand. "Thank you, seriously." He looked at her a moment longer. "Maybe I'll see you around, Vivienne," she blinked. "Maybe." And then he was gone, vanishing between the shelves like a scene from one of her stories. A week passed. She thought about him more than she wanted to admit. Every time the door to the cafe chimed, she looked up, half expecting to see him. Then one Thursday morning, he walked in. She was mid-shift, trying to unclog the espresso machine with her elbow deep in coffee grounds. She spotted him through a cloud of steam and nearly dropped the portafilter. He was in a navy peacoat this time, talking on the phone, his voice low and clipped. He glanced at her and gave a small nod. Her heart actually skipped. He ended the call and walked up to the counter. "Morning," he said. "Is this where the literary disasters hide?" She laughed, wiping her hands on her apron. "Only the embarrassing ones." He leaned slightly against the counter. "I was hoping you'd be here." "Really, I was thinking about you." He said it so simply, like it wasn't the most ridiculous compliment she'd gotten in months. "Can I buy you dinner?" Vivienne blinked. "I what? Dinner? You me tonight?" She stared at him, stunned. "You don't even know me." "I know you're a writer, you love books, you're kind enough to apologize to inanimate objects when you knock them over. That counts for something. You're serious, dead serious." She laughed in disbelief. "Okay, sure." "Dinner? Great." He pulled out a card and wrote something on the back. "Here's the address, 7 o'clock, she read it. "This is a rooftop restaurant, it is, they have heaters." She narrowed her eyes. "You're not a serial killer, are you?" "No," he said with a grin. "But if I were, I'd probably say that too." She burst out laughing. "Wow, okay, 7 o'clock." He nodded once and turned to leave. "Wait," she called. "Why me?" He looked back at her. "Because you didn't ask who I was, and that's rare." Then he left. The rooftop restaurant was straight out of a movie. Vivienne stepped out of the elevator and immediately felt underdressed in her black dress and borrowed heels. The view of the city twinkled behind her like someone had flipped a switch on the sky. Sterling stood near the edge, hands in his pockets, talking to the maitre d'. He turned when he saw her and his whole face changed. "You look amazing," he said, walking over. She flushed. "You clean up pretty well yourself." He led her to a table set with candles and soft jazz playing in the background. No menus, no prices, just a glass of wine poured the second she sat down. "I should ask," she said, lifting her glass, "are you secretly a restaurant owner?" He chuckled. "No. I'm just a guy who made a few lucky business decisions." "I don't believe that for a second. What do you do?" He leaned back in his chair. "Let's just say I invest in things, tech, real estate, renewable energy." She lifted an eyebrow. "So you're rich." "I'm comfortable." She stared at him. "That watch alone is worth more than my student loans." He didn't deny it. "So," she said slowly, "why are you here with me?" "Because money can buy a lot of things," he said quietly. "But not real conversations, not someone who looks at you like you're just a guy in a bookstore." She blinked. "Wow." Their dinner stretched into hours. They talked about everything: books, regrets, dreams, heartbreaks. He listened to her like every word mattered. He told her about growing up in Boston, losing his parents young, building a company from his dorm room. By the time dessert arrived, her cheeks hurt from smiling. When he walked her out, he handed the valet a ticket and a sleek black Maserati pulled up. She laughed. "Okay, now I believe you're rich." He opened the door for her. "Let me drive you home." She hesitated. "I can take the bus." He stepped closer, voice low. "Please let me." She looked up at him. "Okay." He opened the door like it was routine, like this night wasn't the beginning of something that would change everything. As they pulled into the street, she glanced over at him. "I still can't believe this all started with a stack of falling books." He smiled, eyes on the road. "Me neither." Vivienne had never been inside a penthouse before, but when Sterling opened the door to his, it was exactly what she imagined, only more impossible. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline like a painting. The furniture looked like it had been curated by someone who read design magazines for a living. Not a speck of dust, not a crooked cushion. It wasn't just luxurious, it was deliberate, controlled. She stood just inside the entryway, her coat still on, unsure if she should even step further. "So this is where you live." Sterling set his keys in a crystal dish and glanced at her. "Is it too much?" "It's a lot," she admitted, her voice quiet. He studied her a moment. "You don't have to be impressed." "I'm not trying to be impressed," she said. "I'm just trying to figure out how anyone keeps a white rug that clean." That made him laugh. "Strict no-shoes policy." She looked down at her boots. "Right, I've already failed." He walked over and held out his hand. "Then let me make it up to you. Come see the view." She took it cautiously, letting him lead her across the wide, open space to the glass wall. The city glittered beneath them, lights winking in the distance like secret messages. "Do you ever get used to this?" she asked softly. "I don't think I want to," he said. "The minute you stop noticing something beautiful, you forget what it cost to get there." She turned to him. "What did it cost you?" He hesitated. "Time, people, parts of myself I didn't realize I was trading." Vivienne nodded slowly. "That sounds lonely." "It was," he said, "until last week." She looked away, heart thudding. "You don't even know me." "I'm starting to," he said, "and I want to know more." She didn't respond right away. Instead, she pressed one hand to the glass, watching the city breathe under their feet. "I used to think if I just worked hard enough, life would make room for me," she said. "But lately it feels like I'm always standing outside the door knocking." Sterling's voice was low. "Then come in." She turned to him, unsure if he meant the apartment or something deeper. "Let me show you something," he said. He led her down a hallway to what she assumed would be an office or maybe a wine cellar. Instead, it was a room filled with books, thousands of them, floor-to-ceiling shelves on every wall. There was a ladder on rails, a leather chaise. A small glass desk with a vintage typewriter sitting on top. Vivienne stepped inside as if afraid to break the silence. He waited. "This is what my dreams look like," she whispered. "I thought you might like it." She turned to him. "You built a library." "I bought the penthouse because of this room," he said. "I couldn't leave it empty." Her eyes scanned the titles. Some signed, some rare, some worn with love. "You read all of these?" "Most, some twice. There's one I haven't opened yet." "I was saving it." She tilted her head. "For what?" He stepped closer, pulled a small hardcover from the shelf and handed it to her. It was a copy of a novel she'd once mentioned in passing at the cafe. One she said shaped her writing voice. Vivienne stared at it. "How did you, I pay attention?" She ran her fingers over the cover, overwhelmed. "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything," he said. "Just stay a while." So she did. They sat on the floor with their backs against the shelves, shoes off, wine in hand, no music, no background noise. Just pages turning and the sound of their voices weaving stories of who they used to be before life got so complicated. At one point she asked, "Do people ever assume things about you?" "All the time." "Like what?" "That I'm cold, calculated. That I only care about numbers. Is any of it true?" He looked at her for a long time. "It used to be. And now," his voice was quiet, "now I care about different things." The next few days blurred in the way moments do when you're trying not to count them. He showed up at the cafe with a copy of her rare poetry collection she once mentioned. She brought him a cinnamon scone she swore was made from magic. They stopped pretending there was a script and just let whatever this thing was unfold between them. One night, she found herself in the passenger seat of his car again, this time headed to a gallery opening. She wore the dress he'd sent over earlier with a note that simply read, "This made me think of you." Inside, the gallery was filled with sharp angles and harsher stares. Wealth hung in the air like perfume. Sterling kept a hand lightly at her back, guiding her through the crowd. People looked at her like a misplaced bookmark in a first edition. She leaned in. "I don't belong here." "You belong wherever you are," he said without hesitation. They stopped in front of a painting, a stark, abstract piece with bold red strokes cutting across a white canvas. "What do you see?" he asked. "Pain," she said, "and defiance." He smiled faintly. "That's what the artist said, too." A woman approached them, tall, blonde, lips lacquered to perfection. "Sterling, I didn't know you were back in town." "Just for a few weeks," he said coolly, "and this must be Vivienne." The woman's eyes flicked over her like a scanner. "Charming," Vivienne held her gaze. "Likewise." After she walked away, Vivienne turned to him. He nodded, briefly. "Do I want to know more?" "No," he said. "That chapter closed a long time ago." She believed him, but something in the way that woman looked at her made her stomach twist. Later, as they stood on the balcony sipping champagne, Vivienne asked, "Do you always exist in this world of curated elegance and sharp edges?" He considered. "I used to think I had to. And now," his eyes found hers, "now I wonder what it would be like to live in yours." She didn't answer. She didn't know how, but she reached for his hand and he held it like it was the only thing anchoring him to the moment. Later that night, when he dropped her off outside her apartment, he didn't ask to come in. He didn't try to kiss her. He just looked at her the way people do when they're afraid to hope too much. She watched his car disappear down the street and stood there for a long time, heart full and confused, because she could feel it. Whatever this was, it was already more than she'd planned for. And it was only just beginning. Vivienne sat at her kitchen table, the edges of her fingers stained with ink from a pen that had exploded mid-sentence. She stared at her notebook, willing the words to return, but her mind kept drifting back to the way Sterling had looked at her on the gallery balcony like he saw something she wasn't even sure was there. She hadn't heard from him in 3 days. Not a call. Not a note. Not a sudden appearance in the cafe with some obscure novel in hand. She wasn't going to panic. Maybe he was traveling. Maybe he was busy with some high-level meeting that involved boardrooms and billion-dollar ideas. Maybe this was just how people like him operated, hot one week, gone the next. Still, by the 4th day, her stomach developed a quiet ache that wouldn't go away. On the 5th, she got her answer. It came in the form of a man in a tailored navy suit who stepped into the cafe just before closing, asked for her by name, and handed her a cream-colored envelope sealed with a gold crest. She looked at the envelope, then at the man. "You're not from the IRS, are you?" He didn't blink. "Mr. Jensen asked me to deliver that personally." She waited until he left before tearing it open. Inside was a single sentence handwritten in Sterling's tight, elegant script. "I need you to trust me. Meet me at the address below tonight. Midnight." Underneath was an address in Medina, the kind of neighborhood where people didn't so much live as rule from behind rose gardens and electronic gates. She stared at it for a long time. By 11, she was standing outside a wrought iron gate taller than any she'd ever seen. It opened without her touching anything, as if someone had been watching. A black car rolled down the driveway, and the man from earlier wordlessly opened the door for her. "You're taking me to Sterling?" "Yes, Miss Zeller." She slid in, heart pounding. The estate was nothing like the sleek penthouse. This was older, elegant in a way that whispered history. A long driveway curved through manicured hedges and opened into a courtyard lit by warm lanterns. The house itself had ivy crawling up stone walls and windows that glowed like something out of another century. Sterling stood at the top of the stone steps, hands clasped behind his back. He looked exhausted and tense. His shirt sleeves were rolled to his elbows, and there was a faint crease between his brows that hadn't been there before. "You came," he said, voice low. "I almost didn't," she admitted. "You disappeared. I know. I have a rule about men who vanish without explanation. I broke it." "You did," he nodded once. "Come inside, please." The front door opened into a foyer lit by a chandelier so large it looked like it belonged in a museum. She barely had time to take it in before he turned down a hallway and led her into a quiet study. There were no books here. Just a fireplace, 2 leather chairs, and 3 glasses sitting untouched on a side table. He gestured for her to sit. "There's something I need to tell you." "It's not simple," she sat slowly. "You're married?" "No." "You have a secret child?" "No." "You've been in prison?" "I'm not that interesting." She folded her arms. "Then what is it?" He studied her as if weighing how much to say. "The woman at the gallery." "Deanna." Vivienne's chest tightened. "What about her?" "She's not an ex. She's my late brother's widow." Vivienne froze. "Your brother," he nodded. "Elias. He was 3 years older. We started the company together. He died 2 years ago in a plane crash between Zurich and Vienna." She blinked. "I'm sorry, I didn't know." "I never talk about it publicly. We kept most of our family life out of the press, but Deanna and we've had to maintain certain formalities. There's a trust, board seats, legal obligations. It's complicated." Vivienne leaned forward. "Why didn't you just tell me?" "Because I liked the way you looked at me," he said quietly. "Like I wasn't made of headlines and quarterly reports, and I knew that once I let you into that part of my world, it would change things." She ran a hand through her hair, trying to process. "So you disappeared because of her?" "No, I left because of the board." She frowned. "What board?" He stood and walked to the fireplace, bracing one hand against the mantel. "There's a clause in our corporate charter. If I begin a serious relationship, I'm required to disclose it. And if that relationship is deemed a risk to the company's image or operations, they can vote to remove me as CEO." Vivienne stared. "That's insane." "It's business." "No, it's control." He turned back to her. "You're not wrong. But that's the price of the empire we built. And I'm the risk, not you. The idea of us." She stood. "So you ran. Instead of asking me what I wanted, you made the choice for both of us. I was trying to protect you. You don't get to protect me from my own life." His jaw tightened. "Do you think I wanted to stay away?" "I think you were scared." He didn't deny it. Vivienne pressed her hand to her chest. "I don't care if your board disapproves. I don't care if your world is filled with rules and risks. I care about honesty. And you didn't give me that. I'm giving it now. Too late." He stepped forward. "Vivienne, no," she said, voice breaking. "You can't disappear when things get complicated and expect me to be waiting with open arms." He looked stricken. "Then what do I do?" She met his eyes. "You prove that this isn't just convenience or curiosity. You prove that I'm more than a risk on a corporate balance sheet." Silence stretched between them like a wire pulled tight. Then she turned and walked out. He didn't follow, not that night, not the next. But on the 3rd day, something changed. She came home to find her apartment door propped open with a book, her book. The one that had fallen from her bag in the bookstore. Except now it was bound in leather, her name embossed in gold on the cover. Inside, every one of her scribbled notes and half-finished stories had been typed, formatted, and printed. At the back was a single sheet, a publishing contract. She scanned the page, heart racing. A small independent press known for discovering new voices, a generous advance. Full creative control, and a handwritten note. "You said life never made room for you. So I made one." Her knees gave out and she sank onto the floor. He hadn't followed her. He'd built something for her instead, and maybe, just maybe, that meant he was worth trusting after all. It was raining the night Vivienne told herself she was done waiting, not for answers, not for more signs, not even for Sterling Jensen. She had made peace with the silence, even as his last gesture, the bound manuscript, the contract, the note sat on her desk, untouched but not unread. She told herself she needed time, that she owed herself space to understand what she truly wanted. That the life she'd fought to build didn't need to be rescued by wealth or romance, no matter how dazzling either might be. But even as she told herself those things, she knew they weren't the whole truth. She missed him, not the penthouse or the private cars or the way he made the world bend around him with a phone call. She missed the quiet in his voice when he asked questions no one else cared to. She missed the way he listened like he was creating a map of her in real time. She missed the space between them, charged, daring, terrifying, and how it made her feel more alive than she had in years. So when a knock came at her door just past midnight, she didn't hesitate. Sterling stood in the hallway, soaked through, hair dripping dark over his forehead, hands at his sides. Not a driver in sight, no tailored coat or polished shoes, just a man caught in the storm with something to say. "Come inside," she said, stepping back. He didn't speak until she closed the door. "I didn't want to do this like a transaction," he said. "I didn't want the contract or the book to be the thing that brought you back." "It didn't," she said, "but it showed me who you are when no one's watching." He stared at her for a long moment. "I've spent most of my life building things, companies, deals, strategies because it made sense. It was clean, predictable, but you're not any of those things." "Thanks, it's not criticism, it's confession." She folded her arms, heart pounding. "Then tell me the truth." "All of it." He didn't hesitate. "I've been in love once. It ended before it began. I buried my brother and almost lost myself in the process. I've made more money than I know what to do with, but it never quieted the part of me that's always searching. And then I walked into a bookstore and met a woman who knocked over a stack of books and looked at me like I was just some guy in her way." Her throat tightened. "You could have stopped there." "I didn't want to," he said. "You made me remember what it felt like to be seen, not for what I have. Not for what I run, but for who I am. The scared, sharp-edged, damaged parts too." She moved closer slowly. "So what do you want now?" "I want you to write your book. I want to read every page before anyone else does. I want to argue with you about plot holes and character arcs at 2 in the morning. I want to stand beside you when your name is on shelves and you get asked to speak at readings. I want to be in your world, not pull you into mine." She stared at him, rain still dripping from his sleeves. "What about your board?" "I resigned this morning." Her breath caught. "What? They gave me a choice. I made it. You gave up everything." He stepped forward. "No, I gave up what never mattered. I kept what does." Vivienne reached for him before she could stop herself. Her hands found the soaked collar of his shirt, and his arms wrapped around her like they belonged there. The kiss that followed wasn't soft or tentative, it was relief, longing, and everything they hadn't said crashing between them like lightning. When they finally pulled apart, she touched his jaw. "You're freezing." "I walked here," she blinked. "From Medina." "I needed to feel it. The distance between what I thought I wanted and what I actually need." "And what's that, you?" She didn't cry, not because she wasn't overwhelmed, but because something inside her had already decided. Even before he showed up, even before the rain, she took his hand and led him to the kitchen. Made tea, found an old sweatshirt from college and made him change. They didn't talk about the board or the company or Deanna or the penthouse. They talked about the next chapter. 2 weeks later, her book was officially under contract. She didn't take his money. She didn't need to. But he was there when she signed the papers, his hand grazing hers, silent and proud. When the press reached out for comment about Sterling Jensen's resignation, he gave one quote: "Sometimes the best investments are the ones you make with your heart." Vivienne started hosting a weekly writing group at the bookstore where it all began. Sterling showed up for every single one, even when he had no idea what to say. He sat in the back, a notebook in his lap, scribbling things he'd never show her, not yet. She never moved into the penthouse. Instead, they found a loft with exposed brick, high windows, and shelves they built together. It wasn't about luxury. It was about space for books, for love, for the kind of life that didn't need to be curated to be extraordinary. On a spring evening, surrounded by friends and the scent of old pages and fresh ink, Sterling stood in that same bookstore and read the dedication at the front of her debut novel, "To the man who helped me pick up more than just a stack of books." He looked up, and she was already crying. When he crossed the space between them and dropped to one knee right between the fiction and poetry sections, not a single person questioned it. "Marry me," he said, voice steady. "Not because of the life I can offer, but because of the one we'll build together." Vivienne didn't hesitate. "Yes." The applause echoed through the shop, but she only heard his voice when he whispered, "You changed everything." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "So did you?" And in the place where their story had started with a fall, a laugh, and a stranger who didn't walk away, they began again, not as a mistake, not as an accident, but as a love that neither of them had seen coming and both of them had chosen to keep. The wedding was held in a glass conservatory outside the city, surrounded by wild roses, climbing ivy, and the soft hush of water trickling from a stone fountain. Sterling had found the place after hours of searching, claiming it reminded him of something she would write into a story, a place that looked like it had been waiting for them all along. Vivienne stood at the edge of the aisle, heart steady in a way she'd never expected. Her dress was simple silk, draped like a whisper, with sleeves that brushed against her wrists and a trail of tiny buttons down her back. No glitter, no tiara, no fuss, just her. The version of herself she'd fought to become. Sterling waited at the altar in a midnight blue suit, no tie, hands folded in front of him. His eyes never left hers. The moment she took his hand, the hush that had fallen over the room wasn't from awe, it was from knowing. Everyone present knew there was no performance here, no spectacle. Just two people who had chosen each other, again and again, even when it was hard, when the officiant asked for vows, Sterling didn't pull out a card or recite something memorized. "I never believed in inevitability," he began. "I believed in strategy, in logic, in building the life I wanted piece by piece. But then you came in messy, unexpected, real, and none of it made sense anymore. I don't need to control the world when I'm with someone who teaches me how to live in it." Vivienne's voice didn't shake when she spoke. "I've never been someone who trusted easily. I built walls and called them ambition. I told myself I didn't need anyone, but you saw through it. You didn't save me. You stood beside me while I saved myself, and now I choose you. Not because I need to, but because I want to." They signed nothing extravagant after that, no dramatic kiss or choreographed moment. Just hands clasped, eyes locked, and a quiet promise between them that didn't need to be shouted to be heard. Later, at the reception, Sterling pulled her aside just before the sun dipped behind the hills. "Come with me," he said, already reaching for her hand. She followed him out of the conservatory and down a stone path lit with lanterns. At the edge of the garden, a small gate opened into a secluded greenhouse filled with climbing jasmine and herbs planted in copper pots. In the center sat a long wooden table, covered in pages. She stepped closer, eyes wide. "These are drafts, your drafts," he said. "Every version of your manuscript, every edit, every change, I saved them all." Vivienne turned slowly. "Why would you do that?" "Because every version of your story mattered," he said. "Even the ones that didn't make the final cut, just like every part of you matters. Even the pieces you thought you had to hide." She looked down at the pages, her handwriting, her revisions, her voice. "This is the most romantic thing anyone's ever done for me," she whispered. "I wanted you to have a place where your words live," he said, "not because of a contract. Not because of a publisher, but because they're yours." She leaned in and kissed him, soft and slow, surrounded by the scent of basil and lemon thyme. That night, they didn't leave for some exotic honeymoon or disappear behind velvet ropes. They stayed. Among friends, among laughter, dancing barefoot beneath the stars until the candles burned low and her cheeks ached from smiling. As spring turned to summer, Vivienne's book hit shelves across the country. Sterling refused to let her read any reviews. He printed the first one that called her a vital new voice and framed it above her writing desk. She took on speaking events, trembling the first time but steadier the next. He went with her when he could, sat in the back rows of theaters and libraries, never drawing attention, always watching with the kind of pride that made her knees weak. They didn't rush to fill every corner of their life. There was no sudden talk of investments or expansions. No flashy announcements. Just quiet mornings with coffee and newspaper crosswords, dinners made from recipes they forgot to follow, and long walks through neighborhoods they didn't know yet. One afternoon, months after the wedding, Vivienne came home to find Sterling on the floor of the loft, surrounded by open boxes and a small, curious dog with oversized ears and a habit of sitting on his feet. "I thought we were waiting," she said, setting her bag down slowly. "She followed me home from the park," he said. "Wouldn't leave." Vivienne knelt down, scratching behind the pup's ears. "She's got your stubbornness." "I was going to name her Chapter 1, Sterling said. She laughed. "She's not a metaphor, no, but she is ours." They kept the name. More seasons passed. Her second book sold before it was even finished. Sterling joined a nonprofit board focused on literacy programs, never once mentioning the companies he used to own. They traveled, sometimes close by, sometimes far, always with a notebook in her bag and a camera in his. He never asked her to slow down. She never asked him to stop being curious. On their anniversary, he took her back to the bookstore. It had changed owners, but the shelves still creaked the same way. The history still hummed from the floorboards. In the corner where they first met, a plaque had been mounted. Here, a writer knocked over a stack of books and found the rest of her story. She traced the words with her fingers. "You did this?" I asked, he said. They said yes. She looked up at him, heart full in a way that didn't need fireworks or grand declarations anymore. "Nothing in my life has ever made more sense than you," she said. He kissed her in the aisle, soft, sure, surrounded by stories. And they walked out into the evening, hand in hand, ready to write the rest of what came next, together. Always.